Hi, I am Pratim Ranjan Bose, and you are watching my podcast presented by Iravati Research and Communication Center, or IRCC. In this episode, I will interview a very special guest who needs no introduction. India's former Foreign Secretary, Mr. Vardhan Shringla. Mr. Shringla is a native of Darjeeling in my state of West Bengal. He retired from service in April 2022. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me on your show, Pratim. Delighted to be here.
Sir, what are you up to these days? We hear a lot about your Darjeeling Welfare Society. You have been a native of that place, I think, for a century or so. And you also worked in tea industry. So you have strong roots to the region. There were also rumors about you joining politics. So over to you, sir.
Well, as you correctly pointed out, I do belong to Darjeeling. And my father was in government service, and so was I. In the nature of my work, I was either posted abroad or in the capital, New Delhi. So, despite that, I think we had very strong roots in our hometown, strong links with our part of the world, our part of the country. And we made it a point to visit Darjeeling as often as possible. Even when I was posted outside, I made it a point to return home as often as I could. And the fact that I still have my traditional homes in Darjeeling, my own home, both in Darjeeling and Siliguri, is also an added incentive that I essentially intend to settle down there when the time comes. And so I have been working in my own way to contribute in whichever way possible to the welfare of the people of Darjeeling. The Darjeeling Welfare Society, which you mentioned, was formally registered last year, but I've been working on providing services to people in that part of the country from 2014, since I was ambassador in Thailand. And I've continued ever since, even during COVID times, when things were difficult, people were stranded abroad. There was a shortage of essential medical equipment like concentrators and oxygen cylinders. I did my bit in trying to ensure that supplies were made available and that, wherever I could help people. As a matter of fact, most people in Darjeeling consider that because I'm from there, I'm almost duty bound to help anyone from Darjeeling who's in trouble in some part of the world or the other. Even now, I'm sort of I get a lot of requests. People stranded in Russia, people stranded in the Gulf, people having some difficulties, people needing repatriation, and in my own humble way, I try to help all of them to whatever extent I can. About politics, I know you mentioned the BJP. Of course, what is important is that I have worked. I've been very, very fortunate to work under the, I would say, vision and direction of the Prime Minister as ambassador to USA, as foreign secretary, and then as chief coordinator of the G20 subsequent to that. I had the benefit of the, guidance of the Prime Minister based on which we implemented policies. And so there is, ever since I retired, I've really been working in some senses for the Prime Minister, and I have that, I would say, sense of service and commitment, to a man who's given so much to this country and to the people of the country. And whatever little bit I can do to support that effort, I'm happy to do. So my involvement, as I said, in politics, because I'm not formally in politics, is to the extent that I can support those efforts, which today I think, we'd all admit are bearing enormous fruits. There's a transformation in India which is remarkable over the last decade or so. But we will come down to that subsequently. But the short answer to your question is that no, I'm not, formally in politics. I have done my bit of outreach within my part of the state of West Bengal, within the Darjeeling constituency area, Siliguri, Fasideva, Naxalbari, the Darjeeling Hills. And it's been a great experience because I've been able to reach out to people. We've been able to connect with people. And I think that sort of experience is absolutely unique and one that I would do anything to have.
Coincidentally, your native place is also surrounded by countries, and it's quite goes with your kind of profile.
So, if you see Darjeeling constituency, it is a unique one because it has three international borders. Within that constituency, you have the India-Nepal border, the India-Bangladesh border, the India-Bhutan border. And if you go a bit further north into Sikkim, then you also have the border with Tibet and China. So in a certain sense, it is a very strategic part of the country. I've written on this issue, my op-ed piece in the newspapers also points out that Siliguri is a strategic corridor, and that one which we have to look at from a strategic lens. It cannot be seen in a normal point of view because this is a part of the country that is very important and yet vulnerable, both from outside and from within. So we have to make sure that this part of the country is looked at in a different point, from a different point of view, and not business as usual. It cannot be business. It has to be strategic and security oriented. People's aspirations have to be met. That's very important because you need the people with you. I'm not just talking about people in the hills, but people in the plains as well. There are a number of different strands and strains of, I would say, aspiration and desire, which I think are long-standing and require some resolution. But you also need development. The fruits of development have to come, and they're coming, of course. And the center is doing it a bit, but I think there's a lot more coordination required, even with the state, with local authorities, and essentially, it's the area has become restive, and we need to make sure that restiveness is contained.
I agree. For viewers who are watching it from abroad, this particular area is connecting. There is a 70 to 20 kilometer, 60 kilometer long and 20 kilometer wide stretch that is connecting India's mainland with the Northeast India and is very strategic in nature. That is called Siliguri Corridor. Sir, it is almost certain that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will return to power for a third term, probably with a bigger majority. In the last term, the government had successfully waded through multiple challenges, not to mention about this pandemic. Now, from abrogation, I mean, I'm talking from the foreign policy front, foreign affairs front, which you might be handling as a diplomat, and you were in US as an ambassador, as the Indian ambassador when Article 370 was abrogated from Kashmir. And then later on, so the pandemic, then came the Galwan Valley clash and tension in the China border, the India-Canada diplomatic row, allegations by the US, and more critically, as India has suddenly, everyone thought that India cannot grow fast. But during this 10-year period, we saw India changing that norm, and we have rapidly come up. We are promising to become a power. And with that, started a propaganda machine based in the West, which tried to delegitimize the Indian democracy. Now, while we cannot talk about the unforeseen events, how do you see the next 5 years panning out in foreign affairs?
Well, the world has become an uncertain place, that is for sure. I mean, you have not only, as you mentioned, you have the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, you have the Ukraine conflict, which is ongoing. You also have the Middle East situation, which can easily become a larger regional or global conflict. And I think that is not the last of the conflicts or, let's say, dissonance that we will see, in global affairs. What you're really seeing is an unraveling of the order that was created in the aftermath of the Second World War. The Bretton Woods institutions, United Nations, they were all institutions created by the victors of the Second World War. But today, the world is a very different place. I mean, there are countries that have come up in a way that would not have been envisaged in the last century. There is a certain shift a transformation, of power, and power, I mean economic power, technological power, that progress shifting from the west into the east, and Asia has been a beneficiary of that transformation. And at the same time, I think you have other poles that have emerged. Now, you correctly pointed out that I think India has surpassed all expectations under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. I think what the Prime Minister has done is galvanize the nation into a level of stability. He's provided stability, he's provided vision, he's provided the policy framework in which the best of our, I would say, potential has been unleashed. And today, what you're seeing, the fact that India is the fastest growing large economy in the world, our inflation is now, coming below 4%. Our foreign exchange reserves are above $650 billion. I think we are in that very unique position where, unlike most countries in the world, we are on a trajectory that is on a trajectory of high growth, of limitless possibilities, with a young population and a very aspiring generation of youth, and also with the unraveling of women-led development. I think this is what the Prime Minister has also done. He has spearheaded the concept of women-led development, first in the G20, that's at a global level, and now within India, of course, we are seeing that come into focus with representation for women in parliament, in the state assemblies, at the local level. You already have it. There will be, there are no glass ceilings for women in jobs, including in government. And I think the effort to involve women as a productive part of the formal economy will really, I think, also spur that growth, that very, very important extra growth that will be needed for us to become a developed economy by 2047. And of course, that creates its own complications. And as you said, there are those who are desirous and who are very happy to see India's growth and development. There are those sections and interests that may have their own reservations and their own limitations, and that is not just outside but within the country, and that's bound to happen. But I think regardless, India will continue to grow. India will continue to reach its required potential. We should have done this a long time back. If we had a leader like Prime Minister Modi 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we would have achieved the same growth 20, 30 years ago. But today, we're fortunate to have a very, very sound pair of hands leading our country. The stewardship of our country is, in many senses, unmatched in terms of the sagacity and stability with which it's being guided. And I have no doubt that irrespective of some of the murmurs that would come from certain sections of the international community, certain sections of thought and opinion from within and without, we will continue to attain what we need to do. The aspirations of the people of India will be fulfilled.
Right, sir. Yeah, you rightly mentioned about the women side. I think India's the women participation to work has finally, it's still low, but it has moved up after decades. So that's a very important development that had come through. Sir, India-US relationship. Now, this is the most critical element of the bloc. As you said, that the world is unraveling and a lot of churn is waiting or is happening and probably waiting to happen. Now, how do you expect this relationship to grow? Very honestly, this relationship has been taking a different or higher trajectory over the last decade, or I mean, since the NPT, we can say. And how would it, what role should it play in the Indo-Pacific? In fact, we are not hearing much about Indo-Pacific Economic Forum or IPEF. What would be the future role of Quad? How do you expect it to evolve?
Well, having been a first-hand witness to the India-US relationship, I would say this is a remarkable story of how two countries that are vibrant democracies share similar values and principles, have combined and have come together to take that partnership forward in a way that was not imaginable 15, 20 years ago. So we have come a very long way, and we have a long way to go. What I'm very, very satisfied about today is that the relationship with India has reached a certain level of consensus, both in the United States and within our own country. I think there is definitely, we are happy with the fact that on both sides of the political aisle, you have strong support for an India-US relationship in the US. And in India itself also, I think there are very few, let's say, opinions that would, voice any reservations on the way the relationship is going. Because the relationship is based on mutual trust, mutual confidence, and mutual benefit. And on mutual benefit, you can see already the technology aspect of it, the initiative on technology, the ICET aspect of it. And I think if you look at trade, I mean, it's also shooting up both in services and in goods. Most important is the people-to-people ties. I think you have a 4 million strong Indian origin community in the US that is a vital link between us and the United States. And you have US companies that are investing very heavily in India, and they're very bullish on India. So whether you talk about
Tesla is coming.
Tesla is one part of it, but there is hardly any major US company that doesn't have an office in India, doesn't have its R&D network or labs in India, is not doing research and development, and is not involved in being part of India's development and India's future. So that is the very good thing, that US Inc., that means the US private sector, is strongly optimistic about India's growth story, is also helping that growth story by its own involvement and participation in it financially and otherwise. And in terms of technology, as I said. And I think it's very important as we develop, as the Prime Minister's vision of an Atmanirbhar Bharat, an India that is self-sufficient, that is not reliant unduly on countries in terms of its vital supply chains. If you look at the semiconductor policy of developing a semiconductor ecosystem in India, developing the API for pharmaceuticals, and I think all of this is, the active pharmaceutical ingredients. All of this is very important to stabilize our own supply chains and to ensure that we are as independent as possible in the key areas of our economy. So we are, and of course, we are also concluding a number of free trade and preferential trade agreements with trusted partners. So it's supply chains, it's technology, it is also, market access, and all of this, whether it's trade or technology, is feeding into that process that will bring us, enable us to springboard into a developed economy by 2047. You mentioned the Quad. I think the Indo-Pacific and the Quad are also very, very important to the United States. You will recall that President Biden took pains to convene a meeting of the Quad leaders to explain that despite Ukraine, his focus on the Indo-Pacific will not falter. US is committed to an Indo-Pacific policy and to ensuring that the involvement of itself and some of the partner countries will continue. And India, as you can see, has been very, very, very robust in its approach, in being the first responder, being a net security provider, including in the Gulf, in the Gulf of Somalia, where I think we have our Navy has done a tremendous job in rescuing merchant shipping from Somali and other pirates, ensuring that trade routes are kept open. And despite the preoccupation of many of our partners in other theaters, I think we have made sure that our vital interests, which come mainly from the Suez Canal, from the Gulf of Aden, are not unduly hampered.
Okay. I was thinking of asking about economic diplomacy, and you actually answered a lot of queries about semiconductor and about the technology access. Just a quick question here. You said about these Indian Navy operations and to keep the sea safe. the Arabian Sea. Can we expect India to play? This is probably the first time India playing such a leadership role in ensuring security in a region. Can we expect India to continue with it, or it's a temporary phenomenon?
Well, if you recall, even 10 years or 15 years ago, when anti-piracy operations were at its peak because of the huge threat from piracy off the coast of Somalia, we were part of an international coalition. I mean, not part of that, but our efforts were in that same direction, and we did a lot of work. We had always one naval ship on patrol in that area, and today we have been even more proactive. So I think our involvement in providing uh, security in the high seas, in ensuring that uh, countries are not unduly threatened by the actions of terrorists, of pirates, of anti-national, activists of a kind that is harmful from a security perspective. Those efforts will continue.
Okay.
I think there is no doubt that we will increase in the Western Indian Ocean, and perhaps even in the Eastern Indian Ocean in time to come. But clearly, I think we have to display a more robust, participation in global security. Because, as I said, with the established international order falling apart, or rather unraveling slowly, we have to ensure that we are part of the solution. That we must not allow that to happen, and in whichever way, we must reinforce an order that is vital for every country. The smallest country to the largest country will be affected if we don't have some understanding at the global level on how to deal with issues like international peace and security, climate change, sustainable development, issues that today are vital to the interests of each and every individual on the planet. So we have to look at it not only from a national perspective, which is very important, but also I think Prime Minister Modi is clear that we have to look at these issues from a global perspective. So we become what he calls, we take a policy of human-centric globalization. We work for the global common good, whether it's in COVID, that we shared indigenous COVID vaccines with countries across the world. We were one of the few countries that did it on an altruistic mode without expecting anything in return, whether it is in sharing digital public infrastructure, making it open source. We have always come forward to assist other countries. So we, through Atmanirbhar Bharat, strengthen our domestic capacities, but at the same time, I think we help other countries in a manner that is constructive. So today, India is part, under Prime Minister Modi, is part of the global solutions to global problems. Earlier, countries would have looked at us as a problem, but today we are a part of the solutions to problems. That's the difference.
Okay. But sir, just asking here, is this? Do you expect that the world is getting a little disturbed? Or the framework has been under pressure, was discussed. Do you expect it to reach some kind of stabilization in the next 5 years?
Well, we would like to hope that there will be greater stability. But what I'm trying to say is, as the preponderance of countries like the United States, to some extent changes, the global architecture for peace and security becomes challenged, you will have probably more such elements of friction. The rise of China is also one factor. And of course, from our perspective, I think we would like to see a multipolar world. The most stable world is a multipolar world with India as one of the poles. And so you have many countries that provide that leadership. If you look at the G20, all of these countries are those that are either established powers or those that are emerging powers. And by powers, I don't necessarily mean powers that have the coercive ability, but powers that have a constructive ability, that have the capacity to help others. And that is what you need today. You need countries that can help others. If you have an earthquake, someone has to be able to help you. If you are running short of drinking water, an entire island is threatened, someone has to help you. If you have a tsunami, then there has to be some. So natural disasters, anti-terrorism, anti-piracy, dealing with global challenges, whether it is indebtedness of states, whether it is the rising prices of commodities, including energy prices, etc. These are things that you need countries to come forward and deal with. And I think in all of these areas, we've been part of a global solution in the making.
Okay. Now, let me take you to neighborhood, which is, I understand that is very close to your heart. So, how do you see the neighborhood first policy that was brought by the Modi government evolving? And how are we doing vis-a-vis China in this field? I would expect you to share some special insights on Maldives and Bangladesh, where the anti-India sentiments are reportedly high.
Well, I think the Prime Minister's vision of neighborhood first is very much linked to his own idea of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. So when you talk about it within our country, you must include the neighborhood also. And I think in certain senses, we have done that because, if you see, as I said, during COVID time, sharing of vaccines with our neighbors, first and foremost, whether it's Bangladesh, Myanmar, Maldives, Sri Lanka,
I think we supplied
Nepal,
to over
Bhutan.
100 countries.
Yes, but we prioritize the neighborhood. I mean, I have to make that very clear. It's very clear. It's very simple that if you are vaccinated and your neighbor is not, then you have the chance of pandemic coming from there. So it's in your interest to ensure that your neighbor is vaccinated. And that goes for everything else. I mean, you cannot expect to prosper and develop if your neighbors are not doing the same. So neighborhood first has to be seen in that context. That there is a sphere of prosperity that is joint. That is that we as we move along, you also move along, and we take you along. And so, if you look at the vast investments, I mean, today, 50% of our lines of credit are centered on the neighborhood. So, whether it is building of infrastructure, that is border infrastructure, roads, bridges, railway, airports, etc., in our neighborhood, that I think facilitates trade, facilitates people-to-people contacts, facilitates investments. The fact that Bangladesh has emerged as our fifth largest trading partner in the world, and Nepal has emerged as our 10th largest trading partner, gives you an idea of the sort of increases, the vast increases that we have made in trade, and that is because of these reasons: the investment in border infrastructure, removal of non-tariff barriers, working on streamlining trade and investment facilitation with our neighbors. I think that is vital, and that has enabled us to really take that relationship in economic terms, whether it's trade, whether it is connectivity, whether it is any other form of economic cooperation. Power is a very, very good example. I mean, today we are supplying power to Bangladesh. We are buying power from Bhutan. We have a new paradigm for the purchase of power from Nepal, because Indian companies have invested greatly in Nepal's hydroelectric power potential, and that power is being sold to India. So Nepal benefits, India benefits, and we are doing it without the traditional mode of lines of credit. These are private investments going in. Some are public investments also, but not government sponsored. And in many senses, those have brought returns that are incredible. I think in 5 years, that relationship is going to see a transformation. Sri Lanka, I mean, if we can have an undersea cable connecting India with Sri Lanka, then that crisis that they went through a year or so ago would not have happened. 2 years ago would not have happened, because they would not have had an energy shortfall. So there is greater receptivity in Sri Lanka also for a
probably
mutually beneficial relationship.
They won't have to burn liquid fuel for electricity.
You have to ensure that you are generating power through the most efficient and cost-effective methods. Burning diesel, burning fuel is very, very counterproductive and expensive, whether it is in Sri Lanka or in Bangladesh. And we have paradigms that can make that difference. And so you will see that the power sector is one game changer in our relationship with neighboring countries. And answering your last question about the Maldives and Bangladesh and the sentiments that you mentioned, I think my own sense is, having worked very, very closely with Bangladesh and Maldives for the last decade and a half, I can very, very safely tell you that people of both these countries, by and large, have a very, very strong affinity and positive outlook towards India. If you want to go on tourism, it is India. If you want medical facilities, it's in India. If you want to ensure that you're looking for education of a certain kind. It's in India, technical education, high school education. And similarly with the Maldives, I mean, after all, every commodity in the Maldives, from your groceries, your vegetables, to eggs, to stone aggregates for construction, everything comes from India under a government-to-government partnership, which we have renewed, despite some levels of tensions that exist at the intergovernmental level. But I think what is important and what we have to remember when we conduct, foreign policy, which definitely we are doing, is that the people-to-people relationship is the most vital. Whatever you do, you must ensure that the people of that country always regard India in a positive manner. And so that decision to extend the commodities agreement to Maldives, irrespective of the ups and downs that we face with a certain section of the polity in that country, I think is in keeping with that same spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Another example I'll give you is that I was very happy to see that in our order banning the export of onions, we have carved out an exemption for our neighboring countries.
Yes.
So whether it is Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Mauritius, or even some of the Gulf countries, we are ensuring that the supply of onions to those countries, which is very vital, because if onions are in short supply, inflation just ratchets up. So the life of the common man becomes very difficult. He in turn will blame it on India, and that anti-Indian sentiment then increases. So you have to ensure that you look at these countries from the perspective of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and Sabka Vishwas. So Prime Minister's policy, from that point of view, is a very, very broad and a far-seeing and far-sighted policy. He has understood the dynamics, and he has provided the larger framework under which our relationship with these neighbors should be conducted. And I think today, in today's context, you have to make a special effort to reach out to each and every of your neighbors. You have to ensure that the people of those countries, and I think it's very important when you talk about people, is that your efforts are across the board. It should not be with one segment of the polity or the other. I think you need to have a very, very broad approach so that the ups and downs are less. And of course, and you can't avoid that, because some parties will come with a certain anti-India plank for their own political purposes. But it doesn't mean that that you have nothing to do with them. You have to deal with these parties. You have to ensure that their negativity is blunted, and that to large extent, even if they were to come to power, you should be able to deal with them in a way that does not disrupt the normal flow of bilateral relationship between states.
Sir, you mentioned about Bangladesh and our line of credits in the neighborhood, but there are also, for example, specifically about, say, Bangladesh, there are issues, or they complain about this non-implementation of projects. I know for sure that it is not entirely the Indian fault or something. Do you have anything to comment on that? And secondly, Prime Minister Hasina will be visiting India after the election, after the results are out. So, any guess what would she discuss? What the two leaders would be discussing? And I'm particularly curious to know if India would be offering any bailout package. Bangladesh is reeling under foreign exchange crisis for quite some time. Over to you, sir.
So, look, the relationship with Bangladesh has been built up over a period of time. And today, I think that connect is really guided the highest levels. The Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina have a good rapport. The Prime Minister referred to the relationship as a Shonali Adhyay. And I think this is what it reflects. I think, considering where we were and where we have come to, we have addressed most of the major irritants in the relationship. We are today in a state where that relationship is not just moving forward, it's moving forward by leaps and bounds. And I think we have to continue to not only maintain, but we have to continue the momentum of the relationship. We have to take it forward, continue to take it forward. That means you need new areas of cooperation, new initiatives, and fresh impetus into whatever we are doing. And I think that is what the effort will be. I cannot comment on Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's visit, or whether India will extend foreign exchange support. That is in the realm of hypothesis, and I don't know about it, honestly. All I can say is that it's a relationship that has to be nurtured and kept moving forward. and we must, irrespective, as I said, all of us go through the electoral cycles, and we are all get preoccupied with issues that are domestic in nature, but that relationship has to continue to move forward. And I think in case and you mentioned about the line of credit, I think from that perspective, yes, I mean, look, you extend the line of credit. In my time, I think we extended we had $3 billion, we extended another $5 billion, and we also had $1 billion or more for the Rampur for the Rampur super thermal power plant in Khulna. So from that perspective, I think it was very important for us to work very closely with the authorities on both sides to continue to facilitate and keep these projects moving and implementation smooth. And I think over a period of time, both countries have learned to try and streamline things, try and remove any of the processes that were cumbersome, not needed, not required, and to make sure that projects move faster. But at the end of the day, your line of credit is implementation depends on how much the country can absorb. So every recipient country has a capacity to absorb. I mean, if China announces a certain line of credit, it doesn't mean that it's being implemented. I mean, it is only a notional figure. So I think we should not get carried away with grandiose figures that are quoted. What is important is how much is the implementation on the ground. And that implementation on the ground depends on the capacity of that country to absorb credit. Even today, I might say that here's $10 billion, use it immediately, but the ability of that country might be $1 billion a year, or $500 million a year. I'm only generalizing. I'm not talking about Bangladesh. But so it's important that we understand that factor, that every country has a capacity to absorb credit. Every country has an capacity to implement, and your line of credit will move as fast as that absorption is there. And that is irrespective of whether it's Indian credit, Japanese credit, Chinese credit, any credit. It basically, it is, you extend the credit and the country concerned utilizes the credit. You do whatever you can. And I think both countries have done what we can. And I think we are in a very satisfactory state. But obviously, we need to keep it moving. We need to keep it moving from all points of view, including lines of credit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, most welcome, and it's a pleasure.